The learning should be Leila Nishmas for Rabbi Kellemer, Lishav for Shalem, Rabbi Yehuda ben Rivka Leah, who needs a big Yeshua, Rav of Young Israel of West Hempstead. Okay, so tonight, Be'ez Hashem, we are going to discuss how to properly warm up. I just saw a text that you can't. Can you see me? Somebody said they can't see me. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Should be able to be seen. Okay. Sorry about all the technicals. Just got to make sure we have it all straight before we get started. So somebody else can't see me. Peretz, if you're there. Also, I want to thank my brother Peretz for helping out with all the technicals. Peretz, some people can't see. I don't know if you could hear me or not. I don't know if there's anything to do about that. I don't know. Some people are posting they can't see. Okay.
I see you.
All right. Fine. Okay. So I'm sorry. So tonight we're going to discuss how to properly heat up food on Shabbos, or really before Shabbos. Just as again, Hakdama, any questions, just post them on the chat button, it says more on the screen, and then it says chat. Just post your questions, and we'll Be'ez Hashem get to them. If I say any words in Yiddish or Lashon Kodesh, or I can't imagine English, but if I do, then just please either post on the chat that I'm not being clear, and then I will try and get to that. Okay, so last couple of weeks we discussed Isura Daraisa and what makes it a Daraisa on Shabbos. Tonight is going to be exclusively, for the most part, Isura Darabanan, right? Meaning sometimes the Rabbanon put in Gezeras into Hilchos Shabbos or into all halachas, where they say that they were afraid that if you're going to do certain things, even though they're mutter from the Torah, but it may come to cause you to be an over and Issa Daraisa. So, but again, it's strictly the Rabbanon. Now, some of the Gezeras we may not understand because the Metzias has changed, and so it's very hard for us to visualize exactly what went on back then. Also, some of the Gezeras we think are like, why would anybody do this? Why did the Chacham need to make their Gezerah? So the answer to that is that it could very well be that there would be a bunch of people that would not have this issue. But we have to be worried about every Yid. We have to make sure that every Yid keeps Shabbos properly, and we don't want anybody to make mistakes. That's one. Two is that as we see with COVID, right, the doctors, Rabbanim, make a lot of Gezeras, and the reason why they have to do it is because if you don't make the Gezerah, there's inevitably going to be people that are not going to listen. And if they're not going to listen, there's going to be people being Bechal Shabbos Derais. So that's what the Rabbanim had to put in these Gezeras. And that's, again, to make sure that we don't come to do an Isser. The basic way of understanding this is we're going to be discussing how do you keep your food hot. Now, what should be the problem with keeping food hot? You're doing everything before Shabbos. You put it into an oven before Shabbos, or you put it onto a stovetop before Shabbos. The food is fully cooked. What should be the issue? Right? I mean, we turn on our lights before Shabbos. We're allowed to leave our lights on a whole Shabbos. Right? And there's no gezerah with that. So why can't I just put my food on the fire? It's all done before Shabbos. Even though there's malacha that's going to be going on over Shabbos, that never was a problem. But the Chachamim put in certain gezeras because they were afraid mostly that if you're going to do this type of cooking, it's going to be very similar to It's going to be very similar to what you do during the week. And then you're going to end up getting lost in the cooking, and you're going to end up messing with the flame. So basically, there were three major gezeras that Chachamim made when it comes to heating up foods. One is called shehiyah, which the translation of that means waiting. The literal translation of that is waiting, meaning you leave something on the fire. There's certain restrictions and certain specifications how you have to do that. Then there's chazara, which is how you put the food back onto the oven or stove or crock-pot or hot plate, etc., etc. There's ways that you have to do that. And then there's hatmana, which means insulating. Some people don't want to keep their food on the fire, but they'd rather insulate it with towels or blankets or to put into crock pots, etc., that type of thing. And there's certain specific ways how to do that. Also gzeiras midrabanan. Right. So again, these things are the rabbanon, which we said is just as chomer. We treat the rabbanon just as chomer as a deraisa. However, we know that when something's a rabbanon, and the chomer, they're the ones that made these rules, so they also have the wherewithal to say that the rules don't apply in such and such a case. And sometimes it's not easy for us to understand the nuances and the differences between them. So we'll try and explain them as well as we can. But again, if there's any questions, so you post it. There's also, as one more rule, something called loy plug, which means the Chachamim didn't differentiate. Loy from the word no, plug means they don't differentiate, right? Which means that sometimes there can be a situation where you have a gezerah and it seemingly should not apply in such and such a situation. And the Chacham didn't differentiate. They said, yes, even though theoretically this would not, our gezerah wouldn't apply, but in this case it applies anyways because we don't want to differentiate because of confusion, which is interesting because a lot of people get very confused with all these gezerah d'Rabbanan, but that's something that's gonna play an important role in this. Okay, so let's start. We'll try and do, I think, tonight shehiyah and hopefully hatmana, and chazara is the longest, meaning putting food back on the flame is the longest of the gezeras, and the one that has the most differences and ramifications. So I don't think we'll get to it tonight. So Be'ez Hashem, next week we can do chazara. So are there any questions about putting things back at the end of the shir? We'll try and answer them, but we're gonna probably get to that next week. Okay, so first we'll go in the order. So shehiyah means to leave food on the fire. How do you leave food on the fire in the mutter way? So now there's a big disagreement. Amongst the poskim how cooked the food has to be before Shabbos. Last week we discussed messing with food that's not fully cooked on Shabbos, right? Then we said that if you have a pot that has food in it that's not fully cooked, you took off the cover by mistake or to check on it, and you see it's not cooked, you're not allowed to put the pot cover back on because you're actually doing cooking. Here we're talking about where you put it up before Shabbos, and it may not be fully cooked or may be fully cooked. We'll discuss that in a minute. But you're not doing any actions on Shabbos. It's what you're putting up before Shabbos. Right? So the assumption is that where you can only put up food that's fully cooked before Shabbos. The big disagreement is, how do you define fully cooked? Okay, so there's basically, the major disagreement is fully cooked 100%, or does it mean halfway or a third of the way, which I think we discussed. We'll just go over that again. So some say that this machlokes goes back all the way to the times of the Mishnayos. Some say that cooked means, in this case, fully cooked. And you would have to put up your food fully cooked before Shabbos, and then you have no problems. It would have to be 100% cooked. Then you could put it onto an open flame, and you could put it into an oven, no restrictions. Others say that it doesn't have to be fully cooked. It does have to be fully cooked. But the way they define fully cooked is called Michael Ben Drusai, which is not a term that you really have to know, but that's Ben Drusai with certain robbers and crooks that they were always on the go, and they would cook their food halfway or a third of the way. There's a disagreement whether it was halfway or a third of the way, right? But since that was the basic minimal amount of cooking that somebody would eat because they want to cook their stuff, and then they would run because they were always on the run from the law. So we say that their amount is half or a third. So some say that as long as your food is cooked a third or halfway, you can put it up before Shabbos without any restrictions whatsoever. The Chachamim say that you have to have it fully cooked. All right, so that's the first disagreement. Then a third category, as even if it's fully cooked, there's types of foods that if they stay on the fire for longer, they're going to get ruined. And then there's types of foods that the longer they stay on the fire, they're going to get better. They're going to taste better. Like, for example, soup and cholent is going to get better the longer it cooks, right? At least yeshiva bachrim definitely will say that. I don't know if regular people say that, but certainly yeshiva bachrim say that, right? But for the most part, it will get better. It certainly won't get ruined if it stays on the fire. Chicken and meat, etc., that would probably get ruined the longer it stays on the fire. So even within those that say fully cooked, there's also a difference between fully cooked that's going to get better and fully cooked that's going to get worse. Now, what is the problem? The problem is, what were the Chachamim afraid of? Why can't I just like I turn on a light before Shabbos, why can't I just take a pot that's quasi-cooked and put it onto my fire on Shabbos and let it cook like anything else? I'm not doing anything. I'm doing the malacha before Shabbos. We know that there's no restrictions for malacha to be done on Shabbos as long as you do it before. We keep our refrigerators on a whole Shabbos. That's malacha being done before Shabbos. So by cooking, the Chachamim were afraid that if you're going to put it up when it's not fully cooked, then you're going to go check on the food Friday night, 15, 20 minutes after Shabbos started, and you're going to say, oh boy, this is not cooking and I have to start my meal in 20 minutes. And then you're going to go mess with the coals. Absent-mindedly, we're not worried about, let's also make that clear, we're not worried about somebody just deciding, oh, I don't care about Shabbos. We're afraid that you get so involved in the cooking, you say, oh boy, I have guests, I have people, and they're going to be very upset that the food is not cooked. So I'm going to go mess with the coals inadvertently and by mistake. Right? That's what the Chachamim were afraid of. You're going to do it by mistake. So therefore, that's where they were concerned if your food is not going to be cooked. But if your food is fully cooked before Shabbos, okay, so you know it's fully cooked, so you're not going to have a problem with it. There's no chashash that you're going to mess with the coal. So therefore, the first rule is as follows. If the food is fully cooked, then there's no restrictions whatsoever. The Chachamim were not afraid that you're going to mess with the flames. So the same way they're not afraid that you're going to fix your refrigerator if it breaks on Shabbos, so you can plug it in before Shabbos and let it go. So the same thing with the food. If you know that your food is fully cooked, you can put it on an open flame before Shabbos, no problem. There are those that say that the way you define fully cooked is halfway or a third of the way, which we said either last week or the week before. We said that the way you calculate a third or half is if it takes 2 hours for something to cook, so half is going to be an hour, and a third will be 40 minutes. Right? Now we paskin, Ashkenazim paskin, that me'ikar adin, as long as your food is half, preferably half, and even b'di'evet, b'di'evet means if you did it a third of the way cooked, then it's going to be fine. And that's called fully cooked, and you don't need any Bleph, and you don't need any restrictions. You just put it up on the fire, whichever way you want. That's the way we paskin. However, we prefer that it should be fully cooked. It's preferred, okay, this is important. It's preferred to be fully cooked, and it's preferred that it would, okay, let's just stop there. So it's preferred that it should be fully cooked, fine. Let's say it's not fully cooked. So what can you do? Let's say you're running late on a Friday afternoon and you want to put up your cholent, put up your soup, and it's not fully cooked. So what do? So the Chachamim said you're not allowed to put that food up in the regular way that you cook during the week because they're afraid that you're going to mess with the coals. So the Chachamim said if you want to do that, put up not fully cooked food, and we'll get to putting up raw food soon. If I don't, then please remind me. If you want to put up not fully cooked food before Shabbos, then you have to, and this is where technology and where nowadays changes from back then, we get to what's something called goruf v'kotum. Again, this is a term you don't need to know, just giving the background, because if you know the background, then you maybe will get, hopefully we'll get it a little clearer. Garov means the way they cooked back then is they sort of had like a barbecue. Let's just use a barbecue grill, not a gas grill, a coals, right? So if you have coals and you want to make sure something doesn't burn, so you have two options. You can either cover the coals with some dirt or some ashes, which severely limits the heat of the coals, or you can sweep the coals to the side, and so there's still heat being coming out, but it's not going to be your regular heat, right? So those are the two options the Chacham said you can do. And now what does that do for us? What it does is it puts it into your head that you did something that will no longer, it's not your regular way of cooking. It puts something into your head that would remind you, hey, there's no coals there. Why are there no coals? Oh, because it's Friday night. I'm not allowed to mess with the coals. Or you see that why are there ashes or why is there dirt on top of the coals? So, oh, it's Friday night. That's why. So, and you won't mess with the coals. That's what the Chachamim said you should do if your food is not fully cooked. So that, and then you could put up food less than a third, less than halfway. That's the background. There is a din that if you put up the food raw, fresh, meaning right before Shabbos, then because you just put it up, you're never going to go check on it, not for a long time, and you're sort of like giving up on it. There's an opinion that says that you would be able to do that. And not only that, but even if your food you see is not so cooked, then you'll take a raw piece of meat and put it into your cholent, let's say, and then you're going to give up on it because you know that raw piece of meat is not going to be cooked for hours and hours, so you're not going to come to mess with it. That is a heter, which comes out that it's better if somebody's about to put up a cholent without a blech, which we didn't yet explain what the blech does. But if somebody wants to put up a cholent a half hour or 45 minutes before Shabbos or an hour before Shabbos, and they're not sure how much is going to get cooked, it might actually be better to put it up right a minute before Shabbos, where you know for sure it's raw. However, it's really not advisable to do that because nowadays we say that our ovens are a whole lot better than the ovens that they had back then. And our cooking mechanisms are much better, and therefore they may cook a lot faster, and you might end up going to check on it. So that's not something that should l'chatchila, we should not rely on that. And there's a basic way to get around putting up the cholent if you're running late on a Friday, and that is to make a blech. So again, we said back then, what do? You either take the coals or the coals and you sweep it to the side, and then you could put up food that's not fully cooked, or you take ashes and you put it over the fire. Nowadays, we don't cook this way. So what do you have to do? So then there's an obvious question. Why do I have to do anything? We don't mess with our fire the way they did, meaning the way they cooked was with coals. So you can blow it, you can move the coals around. All these things would be a problem on Shabbos. But what are we doing with a flame that's on a stovetop? What are you going to do with that? You're not going to mess with the actual fire. It's not going to do anything, right? You can blow the fire that's on your stovetop. It's just going to move the flame. It's not going to actually do anything. So what exactly is the concern? On the other hand, you say, well, no, there is a way to adjust the flame. You take the knob. And you can move the knob up. If you check on your food and you see that it's not fully cooked, so now you might take the knob and move it. So this brings us to a very interesting disagreement. It's not really a disagreement, but it's interesting how we deal with the Gezerah D'Rabbanan that's from 1,000 years ago or more, and how do we apply it to nowadays. So now the way that you would do something to remind you not to mess with the fire is to cover the fire, right? What did the Chachamim say back then? The Chachamim said, take ashes and put them on top of your coals, or sweep your coals out of the way, right? That's a fine thing. So what would you do? So you'd say, okay, cover. What would be the equivalent nowadays? The equivalent nowadays would be to take a blech, what we call a blech, which is a sheet of metal, which we'll do the hands-on in a few minutes. We'll take the blech and you cover the fire. Now, you might say, that's meaningless. To do that nowadays is meaningless. You're covering the fire, that's very nice, but you're not covering the knobs. The knobs is what the issue is. So some parts can say it doesn't make a difference. The Chachamim made this gezerah way back when that you have to do something to the fire. You don't have to do anything to the knobs. Others say no, but you have to be practical. You might mess with the knobs because that's, if you're going to adjust the fire, that's what you're going to do. So therefore you should cover the knobs. And why even bother covering the fire? And then others say, do both. You should cover the fire because loy plug, like we said before, there's no differentiation. The Chachamim said 1,000 years ago, you got to cover the fire. So you have to cover the fire. Now we practically say, well, using that same thought process, you got to cover the knobs too, so that you don't end up coming to mess with the knobs. And then there's the other opinion that says, okay, just cover the knobs. Those are basically the three options that the poskim discuss. And the bottom line is, obviously, we're going to go, since it's Hilchos Shabbos and it's not something that's so difficult to do, the best way to put on a blech is to cover the fire and to also cover the knobs, which is why many blechs, which happens to be the one that I have, does not have this. Many blechs come with a sheet of metal and then it goes down, like sort of like an L shape, so that it also covers the knobs. And there is an opinion, they say Rabbi Aaron Kotler said this, that you can just cover the knobs and you don't have to cover the fire. That can be relied on. But again, the best thing to do is to cover the fire and to cover the knobs if you can. If you can't cover the knobs, it's for sure okay as long as you cover the fire. Right? And if you just cover the knobs without the fire, there's also plenty to rely on for that. But that's only for Shehiyah. We're going to see Be'ez Hashem next week for Chazara. If you want to put something back on the fire, just covering the knobs is not going to work, because there's a different concern that the Rabbanan had by that than they had by this. Again, so let's just to review with why you would need a blech. The reason why you need a blech is because we're afraid if you put up food before Shabbos that you're going to go check on it and see that it's not ready, and you're going to end up messing with the flame. That was back then, but nowadays our ovens are really less of a concern, but we still have the gezerah, so therefore you have to cover the fire and preferably the knobs. And that's all because we're afraid that you're going to cook, or inadvertently, you're going to cook the food on Shabbos by messing with the coals or messing with the fire, messing with the knobs, messing with the level of the flame, etc., etc. We also said that you only me'ikar adin, according to the basic halacha, is you don't need anything. Again, this is only for keeping food warm. This is not referring to putting food back after you take soup. Let's say you want to put it back on the oven, a long Friday night, you want to have hot soup. This halacha is not referring to putting the food back on the stove top. This is just or the cholent back into the base of the crock-pot. We're not referring to that. We are just referring to when you need a blech to keep food warm for Shabbos, let's say for Friday night or Shabbos day. Again, according to the basic halacha, is if the food is even a third or half cooked, you don't need anything. You could just keep it on an open flame, which as far as I know, people don't do that for safety reasons, or in an oven, and you can leave that without any issue. If it's fully cooked and it's going to be bad for it to cook any longer, meaning then there's really very little concern that you're going to mess with the coals, so then that for sure does not need. Okay? Then you have the opinion of the Mishnah Brura, who says that even though we say that you don't, if the food is fully cooked, you don't need anything covering the flame, but the minig and the best thing to do is always have the flame covered with a blech, and that so that you can get all the opinions in. The Chazon Ish did not agree to this, right? So I think there's varying minhagim in Klal Yisrael the way it's done. I think most people do not leave an open flame. I'm not so sure it's for the halacha or it's because of safety, but they put down a blech. But in the oven, most people do not use a blech in the oven. All right, when you're keeping stuff cooking in the oven for Friday night, most people, as far as I know, do not put a blech. Now, the way you would make a blech in the oven is you would have to put an oven insert, like a metal box. That many of you might remember that's the way it was done before self-clean ovens. That's the way people baked on Pesach, which, as far as I know, really messes with the quality of the food and how you cook it. But to make a blech inside an oven, as far as I know, most people do not do that, which is fine because you're putting the food in fully cooked. I imagine most people are putting the food in fully cooked. which is what a lot of people do, is they put the soup into the oven also. Now, how to halachically open the oven on Shabbos, we won't get to tonight. We're just doing the basics of how you heat, what the proper way is to heat things up. And the Bez Hashem will get to the ovens. It's a whole complicated sugya. How to deal with the oven. Can you leave it on? Does it have to be off? You put it on the clock to shut it off. Sabbath mode. All those things Bez Hashem will get to, just not tonight. Okay, so that's basically it. So that's, again, in a stove. Most people don't put a blech on a Friday night. On a stove, in an oven, most people don't put a blech. On a stove top, most people do use a blech. Okay, now what about a crock-pot? Where does a crock-pot come into this? So a crock-pot, if you want to be Makayim the Mishnah Brura and do like the Mishnah Brura, then you should line the crock-pot with tinfoil. You line the crock-pot with tinfoil, and that acts as a blech. As far as I know, most people, if they don't plan on taking out cholent and putting it back, don't use a blech, but you can if you so choose to be machmer. It doesn't really affect the cooking so much. But it applies to a crock pot. It applies to any way that you're cooking, even if there's no flame. Meaning, some people think, well, there's no flame here, so I would never mess with the flame, right? So the answer is, it doesn't make a difference because it has a knob that's adjustable. If it has a knob that's adjustable, then you might press, you might move the knob. Right? So that's basically it with shehiyah. Okay. So let me look at some questions here. Okay, so if cholent is cooked before Shabbos, can you add water right before Shabbos? If the end result of adding the water, the best thing to do would be to add boiling hot water from the urn. That would be the best way of doing it, and then you have no shaila. If you add cold water,
Lost you, Tiago.
question.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Somebody put on headphones that picked up my iPad. I apologize. Okay, putting up raw garlic right before Shabbos, it's going to be cooked in an hour, is really not so great, because lechatchila we want it to be cooked half or a third before Shabbos starts. The Chazon Ish says you have to. Yeah.
You got cut off by the cold water into the cholent.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll go back. Okay, I apologize. Putting in cold water right before Shabbos. So the best thing to do would be to take hot water and put it in before Shabbos. Not meaning hot water not from the sink, from an urn. Then you have no issue. If you put in the cold water right before Shabbos, again, if you have a blech, no problem. If you have a blech, all of these issues go away, and you could just put it. You could put anything you want. You could put up even raw. Right? Because the blech takes care of this issue. If you put in the cold water right before Shabbos, if the end result of your cholent will be that it's still more than half cooked, which I imagine it will be, then me'ikar adin, it's not going to be a problem. I hope that's clear. Okay, I'm going to cover. I see that the knobs is an issue. I'll go back to that when I show the practical on the kitchen. We'll get back to that. Right, putting up raw garlic right before Shabbos could be an issue, right? Because the problem with that is that it cooks very fast, but it's for Friday night, so it's a little bit of an issue. So if you have a blech, it's no problem. But the thing is, I think the way you make that is by putting it into the oven. If it gets cooked halfway before Shkia, again, I would imagine if it's a woman putting it up and she's lighting candles, so if within 18 minutes it gets halfway cooked or even a third cooked, then it's going to be okay, which I think it would get to that. So you're really okay. And even if not, you have the Chazon Ish to rely on. The Chazon Ish said that it has to get to half cooked by, let's say a half hour after Shkia. So if you put it up 18 minutes before candle lighting, and then you have another half hour, 18 minutes for that, and then another half hour, then for sure it's going to be more than halfway cooked. Right? Fine. So that's that. But theoretically, it could be a problem putting up the garlic. So try to avoid that, or try and put it. Best thing would be to put it up at least 10 minutes before you light candles. Then for sure you're okay. We're never concerned. For some reason, the Chachamim, the Rabbanan were not concerned with lowering the flame. Right? It was more of a problem of raising the flame or messing with the coals. So if you're going to put, I don't know what the example would be, what you mean by this, whoever asked this, that you if you're going to keep something overcooked, that you're going to lower it. The Chachamim never were concerned for that. It wasn't such a common thing. The Chachamim never really made the gzeira for that. But if you're afraid for yourself, then of course you should put tape or something like that. Now to discuss again with the what do you call it? The knobs, right? So the knobs, you're really supposed to. The best thing to do is to cover the fire and cover the knobs. If you can't cover the knobs, like you'll see on my Bleph, then the best thing to do would be to put a piece of tape on them or take off the knob. Those are two options. Or if we're talking about a Crock-Pot, you could take the Crock-Pot and put it facing away from you so you don't see the knob. That would be, again, what we're looking for is a reminder that you don't mess with the knobs. So therefore, by just turning it around, then you're gonna be okay. All right. So that would be the best thing. But again, if you don't do the knobs, we paskin that the flame needs to be covered. If you're gonna put up, you want to be strict and you want to always make sure everything's covered, just the flame. We paskin the flame. Some say also the knobs practically, but that's not the way we paskin. I want to make that clear. That's not the way we paskin. So if you normally do tape the knobs and you forgot, then there's nothing to get stressed out about. It's fine. Or if you're eating by somebody's house that doesn't cover the knobs, it's also fine. The other way we go with it too. Again, these are the Rabbanon. So when there's the Rabbanon, there's a lot of room to be lenient. If you go to somebody's house and they just cover the knobs and they don't have a blech, for this, it's also okay. Right? Or they take out the knobs, whatever it is. Okay? You have an urn. An urn that's put up right before Shabbos is a problem. It's a problem to put up an urn right before Shabbos because the water cooks fast. The water does cook relatively fast. So really, one should be careful to make sure that you put the urn up. Again, you have to know how long it takes for your urn to get to hot, but it's pretty important to put the urn up right before, not right before Shabbos. Do it a little bit before. Okay. If you didn't, then I would imagine you can rely on the Chazon Ish, but by the time it becomes nightfall, let's say you put it right before candle lighting, within 45 minutes, it's going to get fully cooked, and then you're going to be okay. If the urn has a Shabbos mode, may not necessarily help you because it still has to boil before Shabbos. You want this to be boiled before Shabbos. Okay. Now again, crock-pots that have no flame, electric ovens that have no flame, it doesn't make a difference as long as there's a way to adjust your flame, your temperature. We are strict that it's going to require a blech. That's why the crock-pot, there's no flame, and you don't even the heating element is covered. It's covered. Why don't we say that? Oh, I have it covered, right? That does not work. The Chachamim said no. Since this is the way you cook, you need to do something to it to remind you. So either the knobs or make a blech. Okay, hot plate. If a hot plate is not adjustable, then many poskim say that a hot plate it's unadjustable, which it's not. I think the ones they sell in the kosher store and the Jewish stores are all not adjustable. So therefore, that is a blech because there's nothing to adjust, and therefore it's okay. There are others that say, no, a hot plate is still a problem because that's a derech of cooking, right? Basically, it's the basic way to understand this, and we'll get to this more when we talk about putting the food back on the oven. Let's say you have a radiator, the good old radiators that you have in the house, can you put food on top of that before Shabbos to keep your food hot, right? Assuming it's in the winter and you have them on. So that, according to almost all opinions, is okay, because nobody's going to end up, there's nothing to move there, and it's not your regular way of cooking. So if you wanted to keep your soup hot that way, then that would be perfectly fine. That's one end of the range. The other end is putting it on a stovetop, which needs a blech. Where does a crock-pot fall? Is a crock-pot like a radiator, which is not adjustable and there's nothing for you to do? Or do we say, no, a crock-pot is meant to cook? So, which a lot of them they purposely make on a low temperature so you can't possibly cook. So that's where the disagreement comes. In America, the minig is that we use, I personally don't, but the minig in America is like Rabbi Feinstein. He was the Paisik in America, and he held that hot plates, you don't need to do anything with that. You can keep the food on the hot plate. One certainly can rely on that. Okay, warming drawers is a big issue because a warming drawer, most, as far as I know, are adjustable. So since a warming drawer is adjustable, it has the same din as an oven. So if you want to use a warming drawer, you'd have to do something at the minimum, do something to the buttons and cover them, and preferably also line the warming drawer. If it's a one temperature warming drawer, then you wouldn't need to do anything, would have the same din as a hot plate. There are varying opinions about this, but that's the best way to do it. That's not talking about putting food back into a warming drawer. That we'll deal with Bez Hashem next week, hopefully. Warming drawer and a hot plate, right? So I think we discussed. That's all the questions that I have here that seem to be being asked. So that's basically it with shehiyah, right? Again, we're talking about leaving the food on top of the oven. I hope that's been clear. Should I? Oh, it's already 10 o'clock. Yeah. Oh, so an adjustable hot plate will not work. An adjustable hot plate is the same thing as an oven, and therefore it's a problem. So you would have to use tape up the buttons, or preferably tape on the buttons and put something down on top of the heating element. Right. So okay, and I see things popping up on my screen that the raw nowadays that our ovens cook very well, to put something up raw right before Shabbos is really not recommended. It's not recommended. If you did it, it's fine, but it's really not recommended. And if you're gonna do it, put it up mamish. That's the second before Shabbos. But the simple eitzah for that is just put a Bleph. Just put a Bleph. If it's going to be on a stovetop, then just put a piece of metal down. Now, if you forgot, this is something also that I should have mentioned. If you forgot and you didn't put a Bleph, you're allowed to put a Bleph on Shabbos. You can put a Bleph on Shabbos. It's not a problem. The only time a Bleph could theoretically be a problem is if it's going to make the foil red hot. If it's going to make the Bleph into red hot, which would have to have at least one flame on extremely, extremely high, and maybe even multiple flames. But if it's just a low flame, just to keep things warm, then you're allowed to even put the Bleph on Shabbos. Right? Yeah, I just don't know if I should start another subject now. Yeah, okay, I guess let me just, I don't think there's much to show, but I'll just go and I'll move the iPad over and just show a practical of shehiyah, what to do with the Bleph. I hope this comes out. Sorry, bear with me a moment. Can you see that? Okay, a different kitchen tonight. So this would be the Bleph. So this Bleph does not have the L shape that goes down. So this is your Bleph, and then it covers the fire, right? If you have the L shape, then it covers over the knobs, and then it's very good because you get the knobs covered and you get the fire covered, right? So that's now an interesting chumrah to keep, which I forgot to mention, which is that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, so let's say I put down the Bleph, and then I put the pot down on top of the Bleph, and then I say, you know what, I want it to be a little hotter. So then I go and I play with I make the temperature hotter. He said, now you just eliminated what the whole point of the Bleph is. The whole point of the Bleph is to remind you not to mess with the fire, and now you put down the Bleph, and then you adjusted it. So then what's to stop you from doing that again on Shabbos? You again, what does a Bleph do? A Bleph goes down on top of the fire to remind you that, oh, I better not mix with the fire because there's something covered. Oh, it's Shabbos. There's something different about my cooking than it is during the week. So, but let's say I put down the Bleph, and then I say, oh, the fire's it's a little low, and then I turn the knob, and I now adjusted it. So now you just eliminated the whole point of the Bleph. So what Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says is, if you do that, then you should take off the pot, take off the Bleph, and then put it back on, because you just eliminated it. It's a chumrah. So if you didn't do this, then it's fine. But again, once everything is adjusted, you know what the size of the flame is, then you should put down the Bleph, and then don't play with the knobs anymore. So that's basically the Bleph. Can you just tape down the knobs without putting this down? There are opinions that you're allowed to do that, but it's not preferred. Again, because when the Chachamim made the Gezerah, meaning in theory, you would say, why should I put down the Bleph? The only concern is that I'm going to mess with this. Okay, so take down the knobs. The answer is no. The Chachamim didn't differentiate, and they wanted the fire covered. So then that's what we have to do. And then for practical, you would tape the knobs, or you could even take off the knobs, which I don't know if you can see, but on this Crock-Pot, you see it? I don't know if you can see it, but this Crock-Pot, the knob is removed. Right, it's not very difficult to adjust, and you certainly would remember. If you want to make a Bleph in a Crock-Pot, so what you would do is you would take foil. I should have taken some foil, or you can use this. And basically, what you do, or some parts can say parchment paper is actually better than foil. So you would put down the foil in here, and you would want it to actually stick up a little bit so you can see it. I mean, if you line the inside with foil and you can't see it, what kind of reminder is that? What kind of reminder is it that you're not gonna mess with the fire? You have to have it sticking out a little bit. So you say, hey, why is that foil sticking out of my Crock-Pot? And then you say, oh, it's sticking out because that means therefore I won't come to adjust it. And then you have here too. So we're being strict on both ways, and it doesn't have either one. Now, as the urn goes, okay, this one has a Sabbath mode. There's really not much. Just make sure you put it on right before Shabbos. Not before, meaning enough time that it should boil up before Shabbos. And if you didn't, the evidence is going to be okay. Okay, so one other question here. Do you need to cover the walls of the Crock-Pot? So yes, you would need, if you want to do a proper Bleph, then it should be covering the bottom and going out the top. Again, like we said, what's the point of having a Bleph if you can't see it? You'd have to have some of the foil sticking out of the Bleph in order to remind you. But like we discussed, according to the halacha, if your cholent is fully cooked or are half cooked, then that's going to be enough. You don't need a Bleph. Me'ikaradin, you don't need a Bleph. So if that causes stress and the foil gets stuck, parchment paper, this and that, and your cholent is fully cooked, then you don't need a Bleph. If you're going to want to put, and this a lot of people don't understand, I'm not aware of this. It's not tonight's subject, but since we're not going to go on to the next subject because it's late, we'll just say it. If you take out your Crock-Pot If you take out the pot to take cholent Friday night and you do not have foil lining your inside of your crock pot, then it's absolutely usher to put back the crock pot. In order to, if you're going to take out cholent, right, which if you have yeshiva guys, that's what they like to do. Long Friday night, they like to take out cholent. They're going to take out the pot. If you don't have a tin foil or parchment paper or something, and then you're not allowed to put it back. And for this, covering the knob, putting the cholent pot back on, covering the knobs is not enough, according to all opinions. Some say you have to also cover the knob, but just covering the knob for that is not good. Again, for leaving food on from before Shabbos, just as it stays hot, there are poskim that say just covering the knob is okay. To put it back, to put the cholent pot back on, then everybody says you need to have both. Okay. Putting the balls, the roll of the balls that you roll up is not really a blech. That's not enough. The reason why you put the roll of balls, I would have liked to have gotten to it tonight, but Baruch Hashem, we were busy with the other opinion, so with the other subjects, so we'll get to it Bez Hashem next week. Why you put the rolled up balls in there? You might have to do that in addition. According to some places, you have to do that in addition to putting the lined foil, but not everybody agrees to that. So then we'll have to discuss that next week. That goes under the category of insulating. Okay, so yes, the shir will be available on YouTube. I'm working on not having YouTube. I meant to say this. Before. I'm not pro YouTube. One should not have YouTube in order to be able to see shiurim. If it's going to end up causing you to watch other things on YouTube. Having YouTube is no different than having a TV. So I'm working on having it. I'm not working. My people that help me out are working on having a different way of watching it. But if you have YouTube for work, et cetera, and with the proper filters, then of course it's okay. Okay, so putting up the cholent close to Shabbos, again, that's a question that seems to be coming up a lot. Me'ikar adin, if you take a raw cholent, since it's for Shabbos day, you put it up raw right before Shabbos, then you're going to be okay, and it's allowed. But nowadays that our crock-pots cook very well, and our ovens cook very well, and our stovetops cook very well, it can cook quite fast, and then we're afraid that you might start adjusting it. So therefore, it's best that if you're going to put up the cholent right before Shabbos, just put a Bleph. It's a really, again, maybe if I'm saying something that's a little more difficult to do than what I think, I'm never involved in the kitchen, so I might be saying something that I don't know about. So please let me know. But if you're running late in the winter, that happens a lot, right? So you can just put on a Bleph. Again, according to the basic halacha, are you cooking anything? When you put up a cholent a minute before Shabbos, or a soup a minute before Shabbos, that's melacha that you started before Shabbos. You're doing nothing on Shabbos. You did everything before Shabbos. Just like you turn on your lights before Shabbos, right? You don't have to keep your lights off. You did the melacha before Shabbos, and the melacha is continuing into Shabbos. So why is cooking any different? The reason why cooking is different is because the Chachamim were afraid that you're going to, because you get so involved in the cooking, that you're going to go mess with the coals, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the Rabbanan said that. The Torah never said that. The Torah said as long as you put the food up before Shabbos, then you're okay, right? I'll tell you, I should have mentioned this before. Those that say that it's not okay was the Tzedukim, right? The ones that only believed in Torah Shabbal Peh, Shabbat Ksav. So they didn't believe. They believed that you're not allowed to have hot food on Shabbos at all, which is why there's a mitzvah to have hot food on Shabbos, to show that we hold that you can have hot food on Shabbos as long as you heat it up properly. Right? That's why it's a mitzvah to have something hot on Shabbos. Right? So you got to do it properly. So what the Chachamim said is that as long as you cover the flames, then that's no longer a concern that you're going to mess with the flames, and then you could put something up even raw right before Shabbos, because you've eliminated the concern for you messing with the fire. Right? I hope I'm being clear. So therefore, if you're going to put up something raw before Shabbos in a crock-pot, and you've never used a Bleph in a crock-pot, so what you do is just take the foil and put it in line, just put some foil, line the crock-pot, And then that's it. You have yourself a blech, or cover the knob, even covering the knob, and then you can put it up raw before Shabbos. You have no shadows whatsoever, right? Adding raw meat to the chalent before Shabbos is considered. It's still considered cooked, but the reason why it's not a problem is because when you put something raw, then when we say that you're just going to give up on it because you know that you're not going to even bother checking it because you just put it up raw right before Shabbos. So that would also work. But again, it will be best to have a crock-pot, a blech on that. All right. Again, lining the crock-pot would be the bottom and the walls because you want to be able to see it. You want to be able to see the foil sticking out, so that reminds you, right? But okay, you want to just put it. You don't want it to look bad in your kitchen, so you can just put foil there, and then if you tape or turn the crock-pot around so you don't see the knob, that would also be okay for to make the blech. Oh, so if you use a crock-pot, it's an excellent question. If you use a crock-pot all week with a blech, is that a problem? So what we discussed before, what Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, then that's a problem because it no longer acts as a blech. Because again, a blech is a deterrent to just remind you. Again, we're not concerned that somebody's purposely going to do something not according to Allah on Shabbos. We're talking about Erlich Yidden, people who care about the Torah. It's just we get involved with our cooking and we forget. So you put something there to remind you. So the Bishul Zalman said, like we said, I hope I was clear with that if you put on the blech and then you adjust it, you've now eliminated the reminder, right? Because it's supposed to remind you not to touch the knob, and then you put it on and then you touch the knob. So the reminder is gone. So according to that, then you should put on a new blech. You should put on a new blech before Shabbos, if you can. But again, that's a chumrah, and it's as long as it is lined, it fits into the parameters of what the Chacham said, and then you'd be okay. Fine. I hope I was clear. Again, if I wasn't clear, I need to explain something better. Please let me know. Either let Mrs. Jacobs know, and I thank her again for arranging this, or let me know in person. And everybody should be matzliach. And like we said last week, we weren't successful last week, but next week, Bez Hashem, somebody for Sanhedrin should give the shir. And if not, then Bez Hashem will have it. A good tvach and a good yom.